My name's Ethan, and I'm here because something happened. Something I never thought I'd face. I had it all, a good job, a steady life, and a wife who I thought loved me just as much as I loved her. Her name's Anna. We met in college, and I honestly thought it was the start of forever. We had plans, we talked about everything, and I believed in us. I trusted her. I really did. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. It wasn't anything huge at first, just little things. Anna started going to bed earlier, and I'd wake up in the morning to find she was already gone. She said it was for work, and I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. She'd come home late, quiet, like she didn't want to disturb me. I'd ask about her day, make dinner, and we'd go on like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Her late nights became more frequent. Just work, she'd say. But then she started locking her phone, taking it with her everywhere. I'd ask about it, and she'd give me this irritated look, saying, "Don't be paranoid, Ethan." She'd brush it off and I believed her. I thought I was just being insecure. But something inside me didn't sit right. Then I found the notebook. I was looking for old photos in the closet, stuff from our honeymoon, trips we'd taken, and I came across a journal. At first, I didn't think anything of it. But when I opened it, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. The handwriting was unmistakable. And there, in black and white, was a line that would shatter everything. "I don't know if I can ever love him the way I love Adrian." Adrian. It hit me like a punch. My mind raced. I flipped through the pages, hoping I'd misread it. But no, Anna had written about Adrian, someone she'd loved, someone she still cared about. I don't know why I was shocked. I knew, deep down, something had been off for a while, but seeing it written down, it made it real. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. I still wanted to believe she'd never hurt me like that. So I kept quiet. But the more I watched her, the more I saw the cracks in her story. The way she shifted when I asked simple questions, the way she couldn't look me in the eye when I talked about us. I was starting to feel like I was suffocating. The hardest part wasn't just knowing, it was the waiting, the pretending. Seeing her walk through the door like everything was fine, like I was still the man she loved, while I felt like my world was crumbling. But I couldn't let on that I knew. Not yet. And then, I found out more about Adrian. It wasn't just some old fling. No, Adrian was still in her life. Right then, right there, while I was sitting at home, pretending everything was okay. That's when I realized how deep the betrayal went. How much I had been lied to. I wasn't dumb. I knew what was happening, even if Anna thought I didn't. The signs were all there, clear as day. But at first, I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. Not her. Not Anna. I kept telling myself, maybe I'm overreacting or maybe it's all just a misunderstanding. I didn't want to face it. But every time I tried to shake the feeling, it only got stronger. Something was wrong. And it wasn't just the late nights, the secretive behavior. It was the way she acted around me, how distant she'd become. It was like I wasn't even there sometimes, like she was looking right through me. I didn't know how deep it ran until I started paying closer attention. Little things would slip. A name. A look. Conversations she thought I didn't overhear. But one day, I caught her in a lie. One that hit me harder than anything. She'd been working late again, and when she finally came home, I asked her how it went. She told me she'd been at the office, but something didn't sit right. I asked her about a detail, something small, and her face shifted. She said she didn't remember, then quickly changed the subject. I could see the lie, plain as day, but she didn't think I noticed. That's when I realized, she didn't even care enough to hide it anymore. And if she didn't care enough to lie well, then that meant the whole thing was probably a whole lot bigger than I'd thought. So I started digging. Not in any obvious way. No sneaking through her stuff or spying. I wasn't that guy, not yet. But I began paying more attention to her habits, to her phone, to her excuses. I even started following her sometimes, just to see where she went. And sure enough, I found what I'd been looking for. Anna and Adrian. Together. Not just meeting up for coffee or lunch, but something far more personal. They were involved. The little things added up. The final straw came when I found out they were meeting at the same places I'd once taken her. The spots we used to visit together. Our special places, the ones with the good memories. It was like a slap in the face, each one of those places now tainted by their secret. I'd take her there, with love and excitement, and now she was sharing them with him, sharing our history with someone else. I was angry. I was hurt. But mostly I was just numb. Like something inside me had broken, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. I still didn't confront her. Not yet. I wasn't going to let her off easy. I had a plan. A sick, twisted plan, but I needed to make sure she understood what she'd done. I had to make her see, really see, the weight of her betrayal. And I wasn't going to do it with shouting or accusations. I was going to do it my way. The slow burn. I had to show her who had the power now. I had to make her realize that her actions had consequences. Big ones. So, I kept playing the role of the dutiful husband. I made her feel like she was in control, like she was still the one calling the shots. Meanwhile, I was setting things in motion, preparing for the moment when I'd finally show her the truth. The truth about Adrian, about her, and about me. It wasn't going to be pretty. But I knew, deep down, it was the only way to make sure she never forgot what she'd done. And when the time came, it would be my turn to choose. Not hers. Mine. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the waiting. Knowing something was wrong, but having to sit with it, not acting on it yet. I had to plan. I had to wait for the right moment. Every day felt like I was pretending to be someone else, a man who didn't know what was happening right under his nose. Anna never suspected a thing. I played the role of the doting husband, asking about her day, pretending to be oblivious. But I wasn't. I knew what she was doing, and every time she locked her phone or came home late, I could feel the weight of the lie she was living. The problem was, if I confronted her now, it would just turn into a fight. She'd deny everything, make excuses, and I'd be left with nothing but anger and hurt. Anna was good at turning things around, making me feel like I was the one in the wrong. So, I held back. I couldn't let her know I knew. Not yet. Every move I made, every word I said was calculated. I had to wait for the right time. But more than that, I needed to make sure that when the truth came out, it wasn't going to be some messy confrontation where she walked away unscathed. I wanted to take control back, to show her there would be consequences for what she'd done. Not just for her, but for Adrian too. I started thinking about the past, our memories together, the trips we'd taken, the things she used to love. I remembered the paintings we'd worked on, the vacations, the way she used to talk about how happy she was with our life. That's when I came up with the plan. A trip, just the two of us. A weekend getaway to a cabin by the lake. No phones, no distractions. I'd tell her it was a chance for us to reconnect, to get back to what we had. But I wasn't interested in rekindling anything. I had something else in mind. She'd ask questions, of course. Why suddenly plan a trip? Why now after everything? But I was ready. I'd thought about this for weeks. I knew exactly what to say, how to act. I'd be the husband she thought she still knew, the one who wanted to fix things. I could keep the mask on long enough to execute my plan. And when the time came, I'd show her exactly what she had destroyed. It wasn't going to be easy. But I wasn't doing this out of anger. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about taking back control. About showing her that she couldn't just walk away from this, that there were consequences to her actions. I wasn't going to let her forget what she'd done, not for a second. And I wasn't going to let Adrian walk away thinking he'd won, either. So, I waited. And I kept pretending. I kept up the act until the time was right. The cabin by the lake was going to be the place where I would finally confront the truth, where I would show Anna exactly what her betrayal had cost her. And when it was over, I'd make sure she knew. I was the one who got to choose what happened next. Not her. Not Adrian. Me. The weekend getaway was set, the perfect place for what I had planned. Secluded, quiet, no distractions. Just Anna and me. She thought it was an opportunity to reconnect, but I had other intentions. This wasn't about fixing anything. This was about control, about making her face the truth. When I told her about the trip, she seemed a little surprised, but not suspicious. She packed her bags with that half smile, as if she was unsure what I was trying to do, but she didn't ask too many questions. We drove to the cabin, and the closer we got, the more I felt the weight of what I was about to do. Anna still didn't know, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I had to keep up the act a little longer. The cabin was rustic and peaceful, quiet, just like I needed it to be. After we settled in, I told her I had a surprise for her in the cellar. She looked curious, a little eager to see what it was, and I led her down the stairs. She followed me without hesitation, probably thinking it was just another nice gesture, another way to show her I was trying to make things right. When we stepped into the cellar, I watched her face fall. The paintings were hanging on the walls, but they weren't what she remembered. The honeymoon pictures, the anniversary trips, all the happy memories we'd once shared, were now twisted, distorted. The colors were wrong. The smiles were gone. The scenes we'd created together were now chaotic and grotesque. Anna froze, eyes wide, taking in the horror of it. She opened her mouth, trying to find the words, but they didn't come. She was stunned. Why did you do this?" she asked, her voice shaking. I didn't answer right away. I let her look at the paintings for a moment longer, letting the weight of it all sink in. This wasn't just about the artwork. It was about everything we had built together, everything she had torn apart. "You didn't just cheat on me, Anna," I said, my voice steady. "You destroyed everything. You thought you could just walk away, but you forgot one thing. I'm the one who makes the choices now. Not you." Her face went pale. She didn't know what to say, how to react. She just stared at the distorted versions of our memories, trying to understand why I'd done this. But she couldn't. She didn't get it. And that was the point. I didn't want her to get it, at least, not yet. The silence between us stretched. She was broken, but she wasn't ready to admit it. And I wasn't ready to let her off easy. The paintings were just the first part of my plan. She had to understand that what she'd done wasn't just going to fade away. She had to feel the weight of it. But there was more to come. I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. And Anna, standing there in front of those twisted paintings, had no idea what was coming next. The silence in the cellar was suffocating. Anna stood frozen, her eyes still glued to the paintings I'd made. Twisted, corrupted versions of memories she'd once held dear. She didn't say anything, didn't even try to explain herself. I could see the shock in her face, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to make her feel the weight of what she had done. And that's when I knew it was time for the next part. I had prepared a letter. Not just any letter, but a carefully crafted message designed to break her. Not directly, though. That's not how I worked. I wasn't going to confront her face to face and let her beg for forgiveness. No, that would have been too easy. This letter was for Adrian. It had been written weeks earlier, just after I had confirmed everything. It wasn't meant for her, but I knew she would see it. I had already sent it to Adrian a week ago, before we even left for the cabin. The letter was a mix of truth and lies, an illusion wrapped in half-facts, designed to make Adrian question everything he thought he knew. I told him about their secret meetings, about how Anna spoke about him, about their stolen moments. I laid it all out, just enough for him to see that he had been nothing but a pawn in her game. The twist was in the ending. I told Adrian that Anna had said something that made it clear she never truly cared for him the way he thought she did. I made him believe he was just another piece in her selfish little world, another man she used to escape her real life. The letter was written with care, with just the right amount of detail to make Adrian doubt everything, to make him see that Anna had played him just like she had played me. I wasn't done yet, though. I knew Anna hadn't yet grasped the full scope of what I was doing. As she stared at the distorted paintings, I could feel her trying to process it all, trying to put the pieces together in her mind. But she was still missing the biggest piece. She didn't know Adrian was about to show up. I'd timed it perfectly. By now, Adrian had received the letter, and I was ready for him to walk through that door, ready for him to see what his little affair had really cost him. He was going to get the same shock Anna had just felt. I'd prepared for this moment. I knew how to control the situation. And when Adrian walked into that cellar, when he saw the paintings, when he realized the truth, that he had been nothing more than a fool in Anna's game, he'd understand. Just like Anna would understand that her betrayal wasn't just about me anymore. It was about him too. The pieces were falling into place. Anna had no idea what was coming next, but soon, she would. And when Adrian arrived, she would know, there was no way out of this. No more running. No more lies. The reality of what she had done was about to hit both of them, hard. And I was going to be there to watch it all unfold. I didn't have to wait long. Adrian's arrival was the final piece of my plan, and I could feel the tension building as I heard his car pull up outside. Anna was still standing in front of the twisted paintings, lost in confusion. She hadn't yet understood the full scope of what was happening, still too wrapped in the lies she told herself. But soon that would change. I didn't feel any excitement as I heard the cellar door open. This wasn't about emotion anymore, it was just the next step. The door creaked, and there he was, Adrian, looking as clueless as I had expected. Anna didn't see him right away. She was still staring at the paintings on the wall, her back to the door. But when she finally turned around and saw him standing there, her face went pale. Panic flashed across her features. She wasn't prepared for this. What are you doing here? Her voice shook, her eyes wide. Adrian stood in the doorway, clearly confused. He hadn't expected to walk into this, but he should have. I'd made sure of that when I sent him the letter. The one where I described Anna's secret meetings, her stolen moments, and the words she used to talk about him. I'd made him doubt everything. And now, standing in the cellar, surrounded by the corrupted memories, he was starting to understand the reality he'd been a part of. The air between us grew thick with tension. Adrian's gaze moved from Anna to the paintings, and I saw the shift in his face. Confusion turned to realization. His eyes dropped, and I could see the guilt setting in. He wasn't the one who'd been lied to. He wasn't the victim. No, Adrian had been played just as much as I had. Anna, still trying to keep control, didn't speak. She just stood there, frozen. The truth was too much for her to face all at once. She wasn't ready to admit what she'd done, but she was about to be forced into it. Adrian finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What is this? I stepped between them, calm and deliberate. This is what happens when you think you can walk away from your actions, Adrian. This is what happens when you both think there's no cost for betrayal. The words hung in the air, and I watched as Adrian's face shifted from guilt to regret. He realized what I had known all along, that this wasn't just about me anymore. Anna had used him just as much as she had used me. She'd betrayed both of us. The silence stretched out as Adrian's eyes moved from me to Anna. I could see the weight of it hit him, the truth that he wasn't the only one deceived. In that moment, he saw that their affair hadn't just broken me, it had broken them both. Anna's eyes met his, and the truth passed between them, unspoken but understood. The tension was unbearable. Adrian now knew what I had been trying to show him all along, and Anna, standing there, could no longer deny the consequences of her choices. Both of them had lost, and there was no way to escape it now. The silence between us was thick, suffocating, as Anna and Adrian stood frozen. The paintings on the walls, twisted versions of memories we'd once shared, seemed to weigh heavy on their shoulders. There was no escape for either of them. The truth had arrived, and there was nothing left to hide behind. Anna looked everywhere but at us, her eyes darting around the cellar, searching for some way out of this mess. Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. She was trapped, her mind scrambling for some excuse or explanation that would make all this go away. But there was nothing left to say. Not anymore. Adrian stood stiffly beside her, his face pale, eyes wide. He hadn't expected this. Hell, neither had I, not entirely. But there was no denying it now. He wasn't the innocent player in this story. He was just as much a part of the mess they'd made. And I could see him start to realize that. The guilt, the regret, it was there, but it was too late for any of that. You knew? Adrian asked, his voice shaky as he turned to Anna. His eyes begged for some kind of reassurance, some way to make sense of what was happening. But Anna wasn't giving him anything. She was too lost in her own shame, too busy trying to figure out how to fix what couldn't be fixed. Anna took a moment before she spoke. I didn't think it would end like this, she finally muttered. But it wasn't an apology. It was just a hollow attempt to explain away everything she'd done. Of course she didn't think it would end like this. No one does. You don't think about the aftermath when you're busy convincing yourself that your actions won't catch up to you. But here we were, all three of us standing in the wreckage of her choices. You never think about the consequences, I said, my voice steady, almost calm. But now you are. You see what happens when you betray someone who loved you, and now you're going to have to live with it. Adrian shifted uncomfortably, looking from Anna to the paintings. His guilt was clear now. He hadn't expected to be exposed like this, to see his role in everything so plainly. It had all been a game to him, but the truth was darker than he'd imagined. For a moment, Anna just stood there, unable to process it. She was still searching for a way out, hoping for some sort of magical fix, but nothing was coming. She was broken, and so was the world she'd tried to build on lies. Finally, Adrian spoke again, softer this time, almost to himself. What are we supposed to do now? It wasn't a question for me. It was just his attempt to find some clarity in the mess they had created. But I wasn't about to offer answers. The damage had been done, and there was no fixing it. I took a step back, letting the weight of the situation settle in. Anna and Adrian could no longer pretend. Their betrayal, their lies, they had no more space to hide. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about them facing the consequences of what they had done. And I knew, deep down, they would never forget it. I left them there in that cellar, standing in the silence of their own regret. Neither of them moved. Neither of them tried to speak, to justify, to explain. The damage had been done, and there was no way to undo it. The walk up the stairs felt heavier than any of the steps I'd taken in my life. The air in the cabin, once familiar, now felt suffocating. I needed space. I needed air. I needed distance from the scene I had just orchestrated. But as I stepped outside, the crisp night air hit me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. There was a strange sense of finality in all of this, a relief that I hadn't expected. The truth was out. The people who had betrayed me, the woman I loved and the man who thought he could take my place, were now left to face the wreckage of their own making. I didn't look back at the cabin. Not once. I didn't need to see their faces, their guilt-ridden expressions. I had done what I needed to do. And though part of me still wanted to scream, to confront them, I knew that wasn't the way. The truth had already done its work, and there was no going back from it. I spent the night sitting outside, watching the stars above me. It was strange how peaceful everything felt now that the storm had passed. I had planned every moment of this, every piece of the puzzle, but in the end, what mattered most wasn't the revenge itself. It was the realization that I no longer had to live in the shadow of their betrayal. I had reclaimed control, in my own way. By morning, I could hear them inside. The soft murmur of voices, though I couldn't make out the words. I knew they were trying to make sense of everything, but I wasn't there to provide answers. That wasn't my role anymore. I had given them the truth, and now it was up to them to deal with it. I made my breakfast, took my time. I didn't rush. There was no need. My revenge, such as it was, had already been delivered. I could feel the weight lifting off me with every bite of food, every slow sip of coffee. I hadn't just exposed them to each other. I had exposed their own guilt to themselves. And now, they had nowhere to run. They came to find me eventually. Anna first, her face drawn, her eyes tired. She didn't say anything right away. There was no apology, no plea for understanding. She just stood there, the silence between us thick and uncomfortable. "Ethan," she said, her voice small. I didn't want it to end like this. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence was enough. She couldn't undo what had been done. And neither could I. Then Adrian showed up, standing in the doorway with that same look of guilt plastered on his face. He didn't know what to say either. Neither of them did. I looked at them both, but I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel pain, either. There was just this hollow emptiness, a space where everything used to be. And I knew, without a doubt, that they would never forget this moment. Not ever. The moment they stepped into that cellar, everything changed. I had made sure of that. The days after the cellar were like a slow, painful countdown. I stayed mostly to myself, avoiding the conversations I knew were inevitable. Anna tried to reach me, but her words never felt right. Too forced, too careful. Guilt clung to her, but there was something else in her eyes, too. Fear. Fear of losing me. Fear of facing what she'd done. But her fear didn't change anything. Adrian didn't try to speak to me at all. At first, I thought he might come to me, try to apologize, explain himself, but he didn't. He just stayed away, as if hoping everything would fade away. It wouldn't. Not after what they'd done. I spent my days walking the trails by the lake, finding peace in the solitude. The quiet made the weight of everything easier to bear. I didn't need to keep replaying the betrayal in my mind, it had already happened, and there was no undoing it. The cabin, once a place of escape, now felt suffocating. Every corner reminded me of what was lost, what could have been. But it was gone, and in its place was nothing but emptiness. I knew I couldn't stay in that cabin forever. I had to leave, to move on. But before I could, Anna found me again. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice filled with something I couldn't quite place. "Please, just listen. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." Her apology was hollow. How could I believe her after everything? The woman I had loved had betrayed me in the worst way, and now she wanted forgiveness? It didn't work like that. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Anna," I said quietly, staring at the lake. "You've broken something inside me. Something I don't think can ever be fixed." She didn't argue. She just stood there, waiting for something to change, but I wasn't going to change my mind. Not now. Not after what had happened. After a long silence, she asked, "What happens now?" I didn't rush to answer. I wasn't going to give her the comfort of a quick decision. "I'm leaving," I said finally. "I can't keep doing this. Not with you. Not with him." Anna's face fell, her shoulders slumping. She understood what that meant. It wasn't a threat, it was the truth. She had lost me, and so had Adrian. Adrian didn't come to me after that. He didn't come to explain or apologize. He didn't need to. He'd already chosen his path when he stepped into Anna's life. He had to live with that now. The next morning, I packed my things. Anna didn't try to stop me. She didn't beg. She just watched, her regret written all over her face. There was nothing more to say. Nothing left to fix. I left the cabin without looking back. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was moving forward, toward something else. Toward a life without the lies and betrayal, toward healing. I didn't know where I was headed yet. But I knew it would be better than staying in the wreckage of the past. That was enough for now. Leaving the cabin was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It wasn't just about leaving the place, but everything it had come to represent. The lies, the betrayal, the years I had spent believing in something that wasn't real. But I couldn't stay there, drowning in the past. I had to move on, no matter how hard it was. The road felt endless as I drove away, heading nowhere in particular. I didn't have a destination. I just needed space, away from everything that had tied me to Anna and Adrian. The further I went, the more I felt like I was shedding something heavy, but it didn't feel freeing. Not yet. The hole inside me, the one they'd left behind, wasn't going away anytime soon. The first few days were rough. I was still waking up to an unfamiliar silence, trying to adjust to life without the constant presence of their lies. I'd packed up, left it all behind. Anna, Adrian, the cabin. But it didn't change the fact that they'd been part of my life for so long. I had to figure out who I was now, outside of that mess. I started small, finding a place to stay, setting up a new routine. But it wasn't easy. I didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to explain myself. I just needed to breathe. Slowly, though, the heaviness began to lift. The world didn't feel as suffocating anymore. I wasn't running from the pain, but learning to live with it. It was a slow process, but it was happening. There were still moments when the past would catch me off guard. A song, a familiar place, a random conversation. It made me pause, reminded me of Anna and Adrian. For a second, it was like I was back in that place, back in that moment of betrayal. But I started to realize that I couldn't run from it forever. The healing wasn't going to come by avoiding the pain. It was about facing it. One afternoon, I ended up in a small cafe in a town I didn't know. I didn't care about the people there or trying to explain anything. The waitress was polite but distant, giving me the quiet I needed. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, I thought about Anna and Adrian. But this time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was just done. They had their choices to live with, and I had mine. I wasn't going to let their betrayal define me. I didn't know where I was going or what the future held, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see Anna or Adrian again. Part of me didn't care. What mattered now was finding my own peace and starting fresh. The rest would fall into place in time. The days passed, and with each one, I felt more certain of my decision. I wasn't the same person I was before all of this, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. I didn't know exactly what came next, but I knew it was something better. I was ready for it. Weeks had passed, and life was starting to feel a little more like normal. I had a new apartment, a quiet place to sort my thoughts. But even with the distance, there were days when the weight of it all came rushing back. No matter how far I tried to run, the betrayal was always there, lingering in the background. One afternoon, while I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to put some words on paper, my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me who it was. I picked up. Ethan, Anna's voice was shaky. Please, just hear me out. I need to explain. I'd been expecting this call, but hearing her again felt like a punch to the chest. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. It was like she was pulling me back into the past, dragging me into a place I thought I'd escaped. I don't know what there is to explain, Anna, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You made your choice. You hurt me. That's all there is. I know, she whispered. I was wrong. It was a mistake. I'm so sorry. I was selfish, confused. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't want to feel sympathy for her. But hearing the regret in her voice made the wound feel fresh again. Still, I stayed firm. You've said it all already. I can't go back to what we were. I can't forget what you did. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing, her tears just barely held back. I'm sorry, Ethan. I am. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her everything I was feeling, anger, betrayal, sorrow, but none of it would change anything. The decision had been made. I need to move on, I said, my voice low. You need to too. She didn't respond right away, then whispered, I understand. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am. I ended the call, the words hanging between us. It was done. And though I didn't feel relief, I knew it was the only choice I had left. Walking away wasn't about winning, it was about giving myself a chance to heal. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose my future. That's what mattered now. The days after that phone call were quieter, but somehow heavier. The finality of it all still weighed on me, even though I knew I had made the right decision. I'd cut ties with Anna for good, and in doing so, I thought I'd cut the last thread that kept me tethered to the past. But it wasn't that simple. There were moments when I still felt her presence, even though she was gone. Little things, a memory would hit me at random, or I'd find myself caught in thoughts of what could have been. I started questioning if I had really made the right choice. Was walking away the only way forward? Was there no other path for us to repair what had been broken? I didn't have the answers, but I didn't want to go back to the way things were, either. The truth was, I had no idea what a future with Anna would have looked like after everything that had happened. I'd trusted her, given her everything I had, and she'd broken me. But the hardest part wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that she never truly saw me. She was never all in. I had been, but she hadn't. And that hurt more than anything. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, started making plans for things I hadn't had time for when my life had been consumed by Anna. It was strange at first, trying to find purpose in something that wasn't tangled up in betrayal. But slowly, it began to feel like I was moving forward. Like maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for. But even as I filled my days with other things, I knew there was still a part of me that had to heal. That part wasn't just about Anna or Adrian, it was about me, too. I had to rebuild myself, figure out who I was without the shadow of their lies hanging over me. One evening, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet I hadn't realized I'd been missing. And in that moment, I realized something important. I was finally starting to feel like myself again. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. But it was happening. I was letting go. Letting go of Anna. Letting go of the anger, the hurt, the doubts. There was nothing left to prove. I had already chosen my path, and it was mine to walk. It had been a few months since I cut ties with Anna, and I was starting to feel a shift within myself. Things weren't perfect, but I was beginning to get used to the space I'd created. I was getting to know myself again, not as someone who had been betrayed, but as just me. Ethan. No longer Anna's husband or Adrian's unwitting fool. I started to embrace the quiet. I'd been running from it before, scared of being alone with my thoughts, but now, it felt different. It felt like freedom. Every morning, I woke up with the knowledge that I could choose what came next. I could make the day whatever I wanted it to be, and for the first time in a long time, that felt empowering. The phone didn't ring with her name on it anymore. No more late-night messages from Anna apologizing or asking for forgiveness. And I'd stopped checking my email for some sign that Adrian had figured it out, that maybe he was feeling the same sting of regret. There was nothing. Just silence. I had learned to live with it. The silence wasn't the enemy anymore. It was my ally. It gave me the time and space I needed to focus on what really mattered. Myself. One afternoon, a friend reached out, a guy I hadn't talked to in years. He was someone I used to hang out with before life got messy. We made plans to grab drinks, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But I figured, why not? It felt good to reconnect with someone who didn't know the old story, someone who hadn't been caught up in the chaos of my past. When we met up, it felt like nothing had changed. We talked about everything, life, work, the usual stuff, and it was easy. The laughter came naturally. I realized I had missed this kind of simple, uncomplicated connection. No baggage, no history weighing us down. Just two people talking about their lives. It was strange how quickly the old Ethan began to resurface. The guy who could joke around, who could laugh at the stupid things, who could actually enjoy the moment. The guy I thought I'd lost in the aftermath of everything with Anna. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't broken. I had been hurt. I'd been betrayed. But I wasn't broken. I had the power to pick up the pieces and put myself back together. And I was doing it piece by piece. I still didn't have all the answers. I wasn't sure if I was ready to dive into anything serious again, but I wasn't rushing it. For once, I was learning how to live for myself, to find happiness without needing anyone else to validate it. And that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. As I left the bar that night, heading home with a lightness I hadn't known in months, I realized that the hardest part of all of this was letting go. And now that I felt like I could finally breathe again. The past was just that, the past. And whatever came next, I was ready for it. Time had a way of smoothing the edges of things. It wasn't as if the past had disappeared, but it started to feel like something I could look back on without the same sharp sting. Anna was a part of my story, but she wasn't the whole story. Adrian, too. They were chapters, not the entire book. I'd been spending more time with friends, re-engaging with parts of myself I'd buried when I was trying to hold on to a life that wasn't real. It felt good, natural, even. But there were still moments when I caught myself thinking of Anna. There was no denying that she'd been a big part of my life. I couldn't just erase her. But I didn't feel like I needed to anymore. The anger had dulled, and with it, the ache. The betrayal wasn't something I would ever forget, but it wasn't something that defined me either. I still hadn't heard from her. At first, I wondered if I ever would. I'd assumed, after everything, that she'd try to reach out again. Maybe to apologize again, maybe to ask for something. But that silence didn't feel as ominous anymore. It felt like the space I needed, the space I had earned. One day, I ran into someone unexpectedly. It was Sarah, a woman I had met months before. She was a friend of a friend, someone I hadn't thought much of back then, but now we ended up at the same cafe. She was sitting at a corner table, her eyes catching mine as I walked by. We exchanged awkward glances at first, then a smile. The kind of smile that wasn't too forced, but wasn't totally comfortable either. We started talking. It felt strange at first, getting back into the rhythm of small talk. But as the conversation flowed, it became easier. We talked about work, music, travel, simple things. No heavy baggage. No exes. It was refreshing. Sarah wasn't Anna. She didn't know my past, and I didn't feel the weight of history when I looked at her. She was just a woman. A person I could talk to. We met up again a few days later. And again. And slowly, without either of us trying, a connection began to grow. I wasn't rushing into anything. I wasn't even sure what it was yet, but I liked spending time with her. It felt easy, the way things used to feel before Anna and all the mess. It was the kind of feeling I had forgotten existed. But it wasn't just about Sarah. It was about me too. I wasn't trying to replace Anna, or rush into a relationship to fill some void. This was different. This time, I was letting things happen at their own pace, without the pressure of needing to fix anything or move on too quickly. I wasn't healed, not entirely, but I was learning to live again, without relying on the past. I wasn't the same person I had been before Anna, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe I wasn't meant to stay the same. The man I was now had grown from the ashes of everything that had happened. And whatever came next, I was ready for it. A few more months passed, and things with Sarah had become comfortable. Not rushed, but comfortable. We weren't labeling anything, but there was a connection I couldn't deny. We laughed about stupid things, shared quiet moments, and even got into a few heated debates over random stuff like movies or politics. It was easy in a way that felt real, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could truly enjoy someone's company without constantly thinking about the past. But even with Sarah, the shadows of what had happened with Anna were never far from my mind. I'd come a long way, yes, but there were still days when I'd wake up with a knot in my stomach. Still moments when I'd catch myself thinking, what if I'm making the same mistake again? I wasn't just worried about Sarah or if this was too soon, though I did worry about that sometimes, but I was still wrestling with the question of whether I was really healed. Could I ever be? Or was I just pretending I was okay because that was the story I was telling myself? I didn't want to be that guy who rushed into something else to fill a void. I didn't want to end up using Sarah like Anna had used me, even if that wasn't my intention. I needed to be honest with myself before I got any further. So, one afternoon, I decided to take a step back and think. I went for a walk, alone, with nothing but the sound of my own thoughts. No distractions. No interruptions. Just me and the quiet. And after a while, it hit me. The biggest realization I'd had since everything with Anna had started. I didn't need to rush anything. I didn't need to move on right now. It was okay to take things slowly. I had the right to pace myself, to make sure I was doing this for the right reasons. I wasn't afraid of love anymore. I wasn't afraid of commitment. What I was afraid of was being afraid of it. I didn't want to carry that fear with me forever. When I met up with Sarah later that week, I was more settled in my mind. I wasn't making any grand declarations. But I knew one thing for sure. I wanted to keep seeing her. Not to replace something lost, but because I could see a future in it, one step at a time. And that felt different than anything I'd felt before. We didn't talk about labels or where this was going right away. That wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that for the first time in a long time, I was letting myself be open to something new, without rushing it or forcing it. I wasn't ready to forget Anna or erase what had happened, but I was ready to stop living in it. Ready to let go and see what could come next. And for the first time in a while, that felt like a choice I could live with.